talking about is the rising demographic, which most of you may be aware of, which is the Hispanic demographic. There were some questions over there in the conversations, which was, why are so many, very few minorities in the libertarian movement? I would posit the opposite. It's not really an intellectual thing. You can recognize value for value. And what I'm going to be talking is just my experience, my personal experience. I'm not going to give you a huge historical account of what is Mexico and what is happening in there, but there is a state socialist movement present in the southern part of Mexico, and that is very, very real. So essentially, if you guys have been privy to the media, there's 43, the magical 43 number, which is the disappearance or the kidnapping of the 43 students, yes. But the whole popular uprising is a propagandistic movement based only against the PRI, which is the 70-year-old party who has been consolidating power for a very long time. Now here's something that does not get accounted in the media, which is that the kidnapping, the alleged kidnapping, let's not really go into conjecture, is that it was ordered by a PRD, Partido Revolucionario Democrático, which means it's a left-leaning socialist political party. So, in other ways, they're using this to promote their agenda. But is their agenda really legitimate to their movement? Well, the state has been repressing a lot of people, killing people, murdering them. This is a daily occurrence at some times for some sporadic moments, and at others it just becomes tranquil, normalized, and people resume their daily activities. Now, why I say that there are many libertarians that are also Mexican, which, you know, let's forget about those associations, but because I personally saw that. Well, the real meaning, why they want to protest, or the Normalistas de Ayotzinapa, what they're doing is that they want to demand the state for justice. They're still in the paradigm, in the context of the state. And I talked to one of the union leaders, which her name is Edith, and I was reporting there as a journalist, looking to see what the real story is. There's something much bigger going on. The anarcho-capitalists in Mexico, they're going a little bit further away from the rural areas, and they're more concentrated in the city areas. Now, this is a very historical, funny fact here, I guess. In the Russian anarchist movement, or in the Russian socialist movement, I may be incorrect this, but there was the intelligentsia who tried desperately to go and talk to the rural farmers and get them to understand what their type of ideological movement was. But they couldn't do it. They couldn't do it. There was a breach. There was something there. Now, why is that? Well, to say frankly, in my particular people or my folk, is that they're very tribal, they're very insular, and they're very cunning and very streetwise. They don't need the alternative media, and I make this point very clear because they're actually living in the moment. They're participating in reality, which is far removed from the first world countries. Now, this is a very, very real thing. Now, why is that? Because of necessity, the need to survive. Now, look, I respect these people very much, the Normalistas. I don't agree with their state socialism, and I think that there are better alternatives, but I'll tell you this. They say, well, Hector, we're willing to sleep on the floor, we're willing to eat beans and cheese, we're willing to skip on meals to get our movement as effective as possible. Now, me as an activist who has been operating in South Texas, it's 70 Fahrenheit degrees, and we're going out there at the city hall. How many people show up? 2 or 3? I mean, it's 70 Fahrenheit degrees. The world's not going to end. Why is that, I ask myself? Well, they don't have a necessity. They don't have a thirst, a hunger for liberty and survival, which is that. Now, I was speaking with Edith. I was telling him, you know, you're still somewhat reacting to the conditions set forth by government. They're not really producing anything, so they can't give you anything. They're just stealing and taking away. And when she was like, well, we still want to get our wages paid. There are different power structures competing in Mexico. There is the unions, which is the state socialists. There's the radical revolutionary communists, which they are very real. They are armed to the teeth and are really going to try to overthrow the government. There's the Zapatistas, which also operate in the rural areas. Now, there's a very personal experience from that. Actually, I was born in San Luis Potosí. In 1994, they tried to have a violent overthrow of the government. They didn't make it very far, but they made it to the cities. That scared them. Yes, there is a point here in anarcho-capitalist school of thought, which is, well, Jeff Berwick puts forth the idea that the failed state of Mexico allows for freedom. Well, not necessarily. There's freedom to shop. That's not real freedom. I tried to investigate and really get some details, and just asking questions. There's this whole schema of paranoia, anxiety. I mean, the people really feel the state there. They feel the repression of the state. So what did I put forth to these people? What did I say? Well, it has to do with technology. Now, I'm trying to learn something from history and actually put forth those ideas. In my rural area, outside of San Luis Potosí, I mean, we barely got color TV by, I don't know, 2000 or something. I mean, we were way behind. But when I tried to talk to them about, my younger cousin, about math or anything, his eyes really lit up. They were fired up. They're craving knowledge. Yeah. They're ready to be assimilated. It's time. And because they're very cunning, streetwise people, they can operate in the black market without any hesitation. There's no conditioning, no, whoa, I need a license for government to go out and sell oranges. As menial and pathetic as that may be to you people, or whatever it is, think about it. It takes real courage to be transacting within a parasitical government. That takes real courage, and it doesn't just out of the loop. So I don't really think that this is an intellectual battle. It may be here in the United States, very true, but no. Down there is a cultural shift. The repressive movements of both the state socialists, because they're not only hurting the government, they're hurting other people, those unknown, unnamed workers who go 9 to 5, 9 to 6, and put in their hours and try to make the best out of their lives. Those people are not talked about. Those people are not said in the media or the propaganda. Who's talking about them? Are we concerned about them? Well, as I was riding with the cab driver, and he was telling me, look, my name is Juan, and I'm going to tell you something, Hector. We've been really, really suffering because of the negative press and the media. We want to attract as many people as possible here. We want to have commerce, global commerce. Now, that is critical, because now the state socialists are doing this real cool thing that they learned, not by their own instinct, but by the media. So now they're attuned by the social media and can broadcast their message. But that also brings another positive message. We can interact with them. We can interact with them and put many things that are out of this really cool thing. We can put Bitcoin auctions. We can give them a lot of options. But first, we need to make contact with them because they're using social media and actually in the moment. And we can even interact with them by that and have that dialogue and say, hey, look at this cool idea. You can have sustainable gardening, you can have Bitcoin, you can have all these services provided for each other in a mutual aid society, away from government, not by arguing, by example and showing each other, social media. And therefore, they will recognize that intrinsically, because literally this is not something so hard. People can recognize value for value. So when they see that, that's when it starts. You see, the old guard is really so tired and entrenched. They're in the same game. The old guard, meaning those state socialists, those union organizers who go out to the streets and try to really wreck people's lives. I've seen it firsthand. In fact, perhaps this is only my opinion or my experience, but when I saw this firsthand, I saw 2,000 people with sticks, with stones, with everything they can have in their hand, and they said the following: los hombres al frente, las mujeres atrás, y los niños todos atrás. Men on front, women on back, children way behind. And they moved slowly. 10. As irrational as this may be, it was an irrational mob. Let's be true and honest about this, but there's real power to maximize good and bad. So while they were slinging their slogans and their propaganda, I mean, I'm sorry, one of the main critical threats that is keeping our people enslaved, and I'll say this very true, is collectivism. It's the specter of collectivism, because it perpetuates poverty. That is why, Marxism has taken such a strong hold in that. And maybe this is my misinterpretation, but state socialism is not something that is effective, because it has a state. So more to the point, when these people are still continuing doing this and that, there's a youth, there's that golden nugget in this system. There's this golden nugget of people who are ready to just actualize and become free and live in a global society where it's value for value and non-coercive relationships. We're almost there. And I really don't buy into this that the white people are oppressing me and I'm a minority and all that. I'll tell you this much. I'm not a minority and I'm not oppressed. hell no will I identify with my class identity and say I'm empowered. No, I'm a free human being with unlimited potential, and it is up to me, and it's my responsibility to actualize that. So if you guys have any questions, please put them forth.
All right.
Woohoo!
Well, you alluded to the fact that somewhere along the way, for the folks that you're talking about, there was internet introduced, right? You said that there was social media. How well is that working for them?
Well, they can organize with their blogger. I mean, they have satag.com.
I mean, does everybody have a computer in their home or a smartphone or?
I was surprised actually. I came with an old Nokia camera, and then I saw there were people from like these rural areas with like high-tech Nikons and all of these stuff. No, they're well prepared.
Oh, okay.
But I mean, it also puts them at risk because if they play the journalist card, that means that they can be infiltrated by the cops. They have this tactic in which they wear the press pass, go into the movement, and try to identify certain leaders, and it was pretty freaking dangerous.
So it you know, all the different factions that you just brought up, it seems as if you know, and you know, why should we ever doubt? But the fact that none of the three parties you talked about had any kind of really good ideas, good thoughts for the regular people. That basically these are just power grabbers. And is that true? Are we?
Well, look. There are different contingents. There's the union, the largest union of teachers, SATAG. I can't give you the whole acronym because it's not off my memory. And then there's the Normalistas. They're not the same. They're not the same, and they made a clear, specific point to say, no, we're not part of the same movement. Now, why did they do that? Well, because they obviously know that the Normalistas are just reactionary rural workers who want to destroy and get their benefits. I'm sorry, but that's my interpretation. That might not be the whole truth.
When you say Normalista,
Normalistas meaning
define that.
Okay, cool, great. Normalistas are, there's this part of, in the 1800s, mid-1800s, I can't give you the whole details, there was an ideological movement of Marxists who tried to build schools in the rural areas, and they did. They actually built institutions, they have gardens, they have people who work together in a society, in a commune. But then the government started stepping in and offering them benefits, and so they co-opted those institutions, and ever since they've been in a tug of war. And those are the Normalistas, people who are of the rural schools. And it's just a term that makes it easier to remember.
You got this group of people that want power, and back with the 43 students.
That's a magical number. That's a powerful number.
Well, it is. But you're saying that there was some objective to doing that kidnapping, and was it supposed to turn out that way, where they just offed them all, or?
If you want, this is my opinion.
Just kind of curiosity. What was their outcome? How could they turn that into any kind of thing that would put power in anybody, or you know what I'm saying? It's like
to their benefit.
How can they use it to their benefit? Well, first is that the Normalistas, or those revolutionary communists, more exact, they're not defensive. They're offensive. They're continuously trying to derail the government through violent means. When they ordered that attack, or there were buses who were going to protest the city in a certain city in Guerrero, a bunch of buses. The governor heard of it, so he sent federal police, local municipal police, and they all gathered around, they took them around, they shot. There were shots. I saw the video footage on this, the aftermath. So, why would they use this 43 number to their objective? Well, because think about how social media works. It has to be really simple and real prepackaged and ready to go. Nobody knows that the PRD ordered that, the governor had to do. No, they will just say the fault was at the state. El problema fue con el Estado. If it can be propagandistic and in a really, really mean form, then it takes off, and they understand that. That's something that the communists really understand. Slogans and propaganda. Anyone else have? Did I answer that question?
Yeah.
Who's next? Just yell it out.
to you, I mean, you're talking about two different factions that I would think are relatively similar: the state socialists and the radical communists. What? Yeah, I would think. So could you explain the difference?
Well, the difference is that they are rural workers. Those people, the Normalista, are rural workers. The SETEC, no. They are actually some part trained formally to be teachers, to be administrators. They're bureaucrats, in other words.
Okay. So the state socialists are the bureaucrats, the rural workers are the radical communists.
Exactly. Okay. But they're working together because they get results. You had a question?
I had a question. I had another story from Mexico a few years back where some people in rural areas armed themselves to pick out the mafia, and then the government said, hey, no, you don't have the right to defend yourself against the mafia, and try to disarm them.
Yeah, I remember that.
So how are people actually defending themselves or not defending themselves? And does the government manage to disarm them, or can they still operate and do security for themselves?
You brought a really good point that I omitted from my talk, which is the cartels in the government. They're the same power syndicate, the same tool. People still are able to defend. You can get guns illegally and legally, but that's another alternative. Of course, that's not going to go well. People in the inner city are really not packed to the teeth. They're not walking in fear. I'm talking about Acapulco and other cities. Sure. But there are paramilitary forces. You enter to an OXXO, which is 7-Eleven, and there's like a guy with like a big shotgun for a good reason. So there is still that private security and other security forces. Anyone else have a question?
So with all these factions kind of pitted against each other, and the government included, would you say that Mexico is in the middle of a civil war?
Not necessarily, because if that will be the case, then they'll be completely the opposite camps. No, they're willing to work with them. They just don't really pay much seriousness to them.
But if all the warring, opposing factions, and they're all armed to the teeth, if they're all basically the same nationality, isn't that what the definition of a civil war?
Well, if you want to be technical and far removed from the situation, yes. But like in the whole hodgepodge of Mexico, people don't even see it that way. They see it either you're with the state or you're not with us, you know? So the state is really an illusion that is created by people's belief in authority. We all know that, right? Of course. Right. But there's no real division between the people. There's no real division between the people because like if the cartel members are still there, they employ the whole family. They'll have the daughter, the cousin, all of them in the beach, taking care of them, and even better than the police. Like, some people even wonder, why is there no police at the beach of Acapulco? Well, dummy, there are police, but they're not uniformed. They're working for the cartels. They're working for them. I mean, and there are some sketchy things, but I want to catch your question. What is it?
Yeah, so a delegation from the FAT, the FAT, came to Burlington. They're, I guess, like one of those smaller unions that's been in opposition to the larger union movement.
Sure.
Do you know of them or have a sense of like their place within that political system?
I must plead ignorance on this because I mean, on the other edge of this, it's just that what most really grabs my attention is the popular uprising, which is the big threat, that I see as collectivism. But the libertarian movement or the FAT movement, I hate to say this, but they haven't really gotten there. They haven't gotten their place in the media and able to put forth their narratives. Yes?
What is collectivism in your definition?
Submersion to the mob entirely without individual autonomy.
Okay, thank you.
That's great.
All right, any other questions?
So you mentioned obviously the different strains of Marxism and the different ways that it was rolled out in 20s, 30s, that sort of stuff. The art movements and all that sort of stuff. Obviously now the state has a lot of external interests, a lot of external pressure, blah, blah, blah. Insofar as there are people who are anti-state, what is the general feeling, in your opinion? Are they more interested in pursuing sort of agoristic market stuff, or are they more interested in communism, or like how does the anti-state stuff divide out?
Thank you very much for bringing this question. Oh my God, yes, look. So wow, this whole anarcho-capitalist conference from people coming all around the world, happening, right? They're insular, they're talking to their own people, preaching to the choir, right? there was a paintball over there in front, which we all fought and we had a lot of fun. I got shot in the butt by Luke Brodowski, so that's something. But anyways, the thing is really cool because I was talking to the guy my age. You know, he lived there for a long time, and I just talked to him. This is why I don't think it's an intellectual debate. I talked to him, hey, somos anarcocapitalistas, creemos que el gobierno no es bueno, que no te ofrece nada, que nomás te roba. We're anarcho-capitalists, we only think that the government steals, doesn't produce anything. And he was like, you know, that makes a lot of sense. I've been thinking about that a lot, and I told him, especially about agorism, I told him about personal property and all this. It's like, no, yeah, I've been thinking about that for a long time, and it's like, I have other people, and I do Bitcoin. So, yes, you had a question?
So one of the critiques of the sort of kind of free market non-state type of system is that something like, okay, well, you'll have non-state coercive actors emerge like the cartels.
Right.
So living in a society or having been in a society in which that's present. What do you see as the kind of the check on that and the social order that might be emergent, or are the cartels essentially stalking horses for agorism?
It's
Can I take part of that actually?
let me just answer it, and then if I didn't answer something, you can add an addendum to it.
Yeah.
Thing is, look, it's really hard to say because on the shocking front of it, people are willing to accept the cartels because they have a capitalist. Hey, this big parasitic government perpetually has effed me over for centuries. It will continue to do so. We have this competing power structure that is ruthless, but it gets its job done. And in the heart of Mexicans be like, okay, let me be practical. Who's gonna steal me? Who's gonna cause me more pain? Some will say that the cartels will cause more pain, but the general consensus is if they're not bothering me, if they're not getting from me, I'm cool with it. So does that answer your question, or does it need more?
Well, I think that the question is, you know, as the existing state becomes delegitimized, what is to prevent the cartels from essentially asserting themselves as an emergent successor state?
Well,
Or taking out
essentially they're families. They're families. It's an extended family. It's not. It's their
Right,
cousins.
so it's feudalism, but that's still.
Some form, perhaps, yes. There's a lot of political evolution that still needs to happen. Political evolution, more like human social evolution, and that's still not there just yet because, as I recently mentioned, we're tribal, and there's a huge disconnect from the north, from the south, from the central part of Mexico. So everybody wants to just move away and be part of their own. They will say certain other things, but that's not, not to the point. It's who's to say? Who's to say really? Because I can just tell you a bunch of words and say it's this way, but I really don't know. Therefore, anarchy. Right? That should be my. Therefore, anarchy.
All right. I saw a documentary on Vice maybe 2 or 3 years ago about I don't remember what, I think it was Guerra, where there had been a lot of mafia killings, and the locals had wanted to defend themselves, and the you know what I'm talking about, the
Yes.
I think we
government
did
wasn't letting have any guns, so they got guns and they started policing their own neighborhood and having their own trials with like huge juries and consensus. What can you tell me how that relates to the different factions and
True.
In particular, does something like that lead to secession from Mexico?
Well, in all practicality, it already happened because the state is failing. It can't provide the services, the security services it supposedly promised to people. So because of that, the result is that the rural workers or those outside of the power centers have to procure for themselves, like you said in the documentary. So where does that really leave them? Well, they have their own communities, their own trials, and the problem with it, it's a tandem, it's a balance. I've seen it personally how it works, because once they already have the social gathering, they still try to have meetings and have consensus, and I've seen how it happens through trial basis. In fact, they're trying to even get somebody who was a supposed infiltrator an impromptu trial to see if he was actually telling the truth. But in those contexts, it's really hard because rationality is typically not the one that triumphs. So yes, it's good in practice that they have their own systems, and in practicality, it's their own government. Really, it is their own government. It just doesn't get its name or recognized by the United Nations or by everybody else outside of their own.
What's their like? Are they more that particular group? Are they more communists or are they more capitalists?
You know the answer to that one. Revolutionary communists.
They are
It's
communists. Okay.
yeah.
I wasn't clear on that.
Oh, I'm so sorry. But the anarcho-capitalist movement still needs a lot of work on it, and it's just happening through universities and stuff like that. So it's not really part of that world. It's different, man. There's different bubbles.
Can I ask, in regards to like the Fast and the Furious program, speaking about cartels, how
Sure.
did that kind of play out within the different communities and stuff?
Another drop in the bucket. Another drop in the bucket. In San Luis Potosí, I visited some time ago, and I wanted to talk to the local, and I did. Of course I did. And I said, well, what do you think about this and that? It's like, you're not telling me anything new. We know that the bankers launder money. We've seen a lot of corruption, so we already know that they're part of the whole thing. And it comes no surprise to them. It's almost a cynicism, you know? It's gonna happen, it will happen, what's new? So, yeah, they already knew that. Anyone else?
I know this is slightly off topic, but has anybody ever told you you look sort of like Cantinflas? Do you know the guy?
Yeah. Yes. It's the second time someone tells me I look like Cantinflas. He's one of my favorite tragic comedians. It's wonderful. In fact, I've actually, when I was young and poor, he really brought me a lot of joy. And it's just something that I hold dear to my heart. And
My father used to
You
take
said
us to
that
those movies.
you said that that it's a very tribalistic mentality down there. Do you see that as basically like multiple secession movements by default? Maybe not by that name.
there's too much friction because, like, in the Yucatan Peninsula and over there's Guatemala, and even there, like, they don't want anyone from there whatsoever. They don't want to be anything. They'd rather have the state enforce the borders, which only solidifies the power of legitimacy, right?
Right, because of
Yeah,
southern
because of
immigration
those-
from the south.
Yeah, those savages down there. You see, that's something that the liberal media doesn't cover. Like, yes, there's a lot of racism in Mexico, a whole lot. Afro-Mexicans get discriminated a whole lot. I mean, this is a topic that has been constant in our culture. I don't know why they do it. We're so alike. The Oaxaqueños don't get along with those from Monterrey and this and that. It's just like, I don't know what's going to happen after that.
Yeah, so you mentioned that the anarcho-capitalist movement, insofar as it is a thing, is mostly coming out of universities. Do you think there's any particular reason for this?
Yeah, well, because it's an intellectual movement that they really talk about.
Sure.
And I know I just said, oh, it's not an intellectual debate, earn it. No, but they really try to preach to that. The people
Sure.
who are attuned to them. They have a podcast, Movimiento Libertario Mexicano, MLM. You can look them up. And I think they
Instead of MLL. Jack instead of
They
MLL.
came to the Free State Project some time ago. I don't know if Hugo Frigio or something.
Has Ernie Hancock done his DVDs, with the little stick figure Liberty thing? They sent them over to Egypt and the Middle East and they blame some of the color revolutions on that distribution of I can't forget the title of it, but it's on every front page of anybody that's Ernie Hancock, Free Talk Live. After that video was being produced there, and it's just a basic stick finger. Understanding of the NAP and, their own responsibility and, and I'm just wondering if any of that has made its way into Mexico. Because they translated it, all of it into, I don't know how many languages.
Is it the philosophy of liberty?
Yeah, that's the name.
Yeah,
I know what you're
that one.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, I know what you're talking about.
Is there any penetration of that? We gotta go have go and donate some money to friggin' Ernie Hancock, cause he can generate that.
I mean, there's obviously internet in Mexico, so
Definitely.
there's YouTube, and it's on YouTube. It's
Exactly.
fine. So I know plenty of people have seen that.
And face.
YouTube Liberty, that's one of the first 2 or 3 things to come up.
Yeah, oh yeah, no, I know, it's really popular.
What's your
So,
question?
so one thing I'm wondering is, like, as the United States is, for at least this is now basically for most of its existence, been an imperial state and a colonial state.
Sure.
Do you think that in terms of the relationship between the United States as state and Mexico, that the United States as state benefits more and it's in its interest to keep Mexico destabilized, or to sort of support the emergence of a strong Mexican state?
I'll suggest something, and then I'll put something that I've been thinking about for a while. First off, hell no, it works for both of them. It really works beautifully for both of them. Whether it's lopsided or not, it still maintains the survival of the state in Mexico, and it continues the growth of the United States. It's like a symbiotic parasite festival. Because seriously, like, okay, so the government is screwing me over. What do? The United States of Mexico blames the United States of America. They did it. Let's project hatred over the border. Now, there is a real revamping of the infrastructure of the United States of America. Okay.
So for instance, the massive immigration. So the destabilization has caused massive immigration north.
Yes.
And that's created a subjugated, extra legal labor population
Sure.
that can be exploited at a rate much higher than people who are sort of within the legal structure of the United States. So do you think that kind of that destabilization of Mexico is something that's kind of that fits within that larger scheme?
I was going to cover that. In fact, it was part of the North American Free Trade Agreement. In fact, that is part of the agenda. What I'm trying to battle here, what I'm trying to really put forth, is that the North American Union will be happening, is already underway. Don't even think about voting hard. Just really think about it. Hold on, let me just finish this. Because, yes, it's true. Now, it's a competing wages for the lowest, and continuously. But it helps the corporate government. So they can just remove the borders, give you your American workers visa, and move freely, but they will still subjugate you, disenfranchise you, and abuse you as they like. So, on the longer picture of this, while they're doing this, there is this particular white document paper that I can't remember the title, but it's the Canadian Chiefs Executives or something like that. And it's starting to do the analysis on how can they improve the logistics of Mexico, or how can they incorporate Mexico into the bigger picture? Because the agenda is already solid. The lawmakers, the policymakers, they already said there will be a North American Union. Now comes those big businesses who want to set the land to their favor. So they're thinking they're going to bring it up, prop it up, give more, liberalize it, give social welfare programs and things like that. In the meantime, that's going to gain popularity. That's going to help some people for some time. So when that happens, they're going to have popular support. They're going to have legitimacy. Therefore, look at this new North American Union. We're bringing so much business. We're bringing so much prosperity. In the 5-year plan, then everything goes downhill when people stop looking, and then the blame game starts. Therefore, they still win. Your question?
Yes, along that line, I want to know, I just came to California. We bought a lot of really good produce from Mexico. Cheap, 99-cent store, right?
Yes.
And other places. Should we continue to purchase this stuff, or is that a good thing or a bad thing? I've been wondering about this.
Do it. Continue it. There's this, the produce is fresh. Just call it organic is not really something. They grow it naturally. They don't
can't afford chemical, right?
Yes. Well, no. In fact, they learn so well how to really use water and how to use everything. They don't need a YouTube video telling them how to do it. My great-grandmother, I guess, she's like grand-aunt or something. All she does, basically, she has an old well, a chicken, and a cow, and this plot of land as big as this hotel, and she just sits in the sun, talks to the chicken and the cow, and is very healthy, almost 90. And there's these big lemons. So there's a real richness in that. And I guess we can wrap it up here, unless you guys have other questions.
Many more questions.
Yeah,
sure,
so
tell me.
Just to, I lived in El Paso. I've actually moved from El Paso to here. Best food ever. And I'm impressed with how well they figured out how to farm in the desert. Question though is, you may have already touched on it, how do the cartels and all the violence going on there play into the dynamic you're discussing?
Cool, thank you. What happens here is that outside of San Luis Potosí, I have indigenous upbringing, so I have some land there that is Cubillos, Rancho de Cubillos. But you wake up at 5 a.m., 6 a.m., Wow. There's cartel training camps there. No, really, like, and like you wake up and you think, holy hell, man, there's something, they're gonna come kill me and all this.
Welcome to America.
Oh no, and then like I talk to my relatives like, oh yeah, just don't go there. They won't bother you if you don't bother them. And we're like, we'll go about our day, we ride our horses, we trek, we go, we do things.
So that kind of leads into another question about is the U.S. Portrayal of the cartel accurate, or the U.S. media portrayal of them? I mean, I know they're a violent organization for sure, but is it true so much that they'll cut your head off for
Definitely.
Well, yeah, no, I mean, I'm sure someone in the cartel would cut your head off, but I guess my question there was, I mean, I've heard them played out to be like basically the equivalent of a violent terrorist organization. Are they that, or are they an organization that's like just selling drugs and employing violence because they have no other option for repercussion, basically?
Well, that is true, but the tactics that they learned, let us not forget where they learned it from. They learned it from the Americans. The School of Americas taught these cartel leaders how to do torture, how to do counterterrorism. So
this is the one in like
horror movie.
Right.
What's your evidence, bro?
This is the one in Fort Benning, Georgia, or School of the Americas.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the one I'm talking about.
Okay.
And then then the succession of generations and power grabs and power dynamic took root, and it's an organic thing, but it's not like everything's gonna fall apart. And I just want to clarify the point that there is those cartels, and if like they want some things from your land, they will take it away. That's just force. But
that's not something.
Of course, it's not cool. But people do uprise. They do try to. They're not cowards. They actually do fight. It's just that that's not mentioned in the portrayal of the media, because who's gonna care about a contingent of rural workers who got their machetes and really got somebody hacked off? Nobody's going to be talking about that.
Sure. You mentioned earlier that in your experience that the anarcho-capitalist groups or people in Mexico are primarily operating out of universities, and it sounds like they're quite out of touch with the situation of real people on the ground, which is pretty typical. Do you see them, given the cartel situation, all these other difficult situations, do you see those movements attempting to learn what it is that people are facing, or are they just kind of ivory tower? Like, how are they trying to make inroads to spread the ideas, or are they just like sitting there talking?
No, they do. They do get the idea. They understand the environment. They posit a solution, but really, if you want to change things, you have to have a personal stake in the game. And I mean, because we talk about revolution here, and over there, it's a real thing, meaning that it's a life and death situation. There's professors who go out to this movement, to the march, and they get killed. They get beaten to death. And I have the newspapers here if y'all are interested in seeing them, but it's just a little small snippet. So in order to say to yourself, okay, I want to live a happy life in which I follow the non-aggression principle and I posit the solutions as much as I can, or I go into the shit pile and get torn to shreds. That's a real question that people have to do, and like, I myself, I'm willing to do that because I have a personal stake in it, and it really affects my life directly. Like NAFTA affected my life directly. I mean, it broke my whole economic prosperity. It really hit me. So like, it's not something I'm just gonna be talking about. I'm gonna go for it. Your question?
Yeah, on a note of you saying there's like real revolution happening there. Could you elaborate at all?
Sure.
On, like, well, I guess specific situations I've heard of, like Jeff Berwick talks a lot about like people just straight up burning down police stations. Does that happen on an at all frequent basis?
True. It happens, but not frequently. And if it does happen, it's like they sometimes stage it to put the narrative away from the Normalistas. So they already learned, they did that effectively, and they burned down buildings and all this, but see, the state is so corrupt and so inept that it has these white papers in those specific offices which they're gonna burn down. So, catch-22, help me out, I'll help you out, because they buy the union leaders. It's what happens. They just buy them up and say, hey, look, I have some dirty laundry over there. Why don't you go burn it down? For your movement, for my cause.
We'll let you get away with it. We won't beat you to death. Yeah.
But there are instances in which there's so much vitriol, so much violence, that they will go to the military bases and do whatever they can. It's crazy. crazy to think that these people are so fed up that they're willing to do whatever they can. I'll give you this example. I mean, well, there was hundreds, dozens of like riot-geared police, or just completely a whole line, and 2,000 people, and there's just almost a very thin space. There's a man, like, because there's one thing that can happen in this, either total violence or we could just cool it. There was a man ready to pull out his machete, and he was already doing it. He had to be stopped twice or 3 times to slash one of these cops. I'm serious. So like, it's a stone throw away from physical thing. And like when I say a real revolution, let me not just say things and be vague. Let me put it forth. A power struggle in which force is initiated and property is destroyed, and those who are outside of that circle are harmed no way other. Yeah, nonetheless, sorry.
How does that? Well, okay. So how in the event that one of these factions took over the Mexican government, how would the different factions' stance on NAFTA come into play? And would that destroy NAFTA with any of them?
Are any of them opposed to it?
Yes. Yeah. Emiliano Zapata is one of those revolutionary leaders, very charismatic. He leads the front of the Zapatistas. He, in fact, hates NAFTA for a very good reason, because it disposes rural land workers from their farmland and gives it to Walmart, and gives it to these big corporations. So yeah, there's a real movement to that. And
Can you define Zapatista?
Zapatistas, okay, they're down south, part of the southern region of Mexico. They're revolutionary communists, but they take a different approach. They've been active for decades. Most of them are downtrodden, poverty-stricken people who really have no leadership outside of their charismatic leader. But after a while, I mean, after their failed revolution, they started learning a lot more. They started connecting with other people, being more sophisticated. So it's somewhat undefinable, to be honest and authentic to you, because they are anonymous. They try to be in the wilderness and not in the media and not in the eye of the state. Does that answer your question?
Is that in Chiapas, or is that the
Yes. Yes.
Comandante Cerro, or
Narco.
I forget the name of that. Okay, Chiapas.
They're Chiapanecos. Yeah, they're from Chiapas. But they're from different areas. Like it's, they can all be from different districts, and they'll just hijack a bunch of buses, and they'll go to the city, and they'll be in the city until their results is met or whatever. But you know, I don't know how far they can get, and even if they get control of the government, it's the same thing. They're going to be doing the same thing. They're going to try to embrace a welfare state, and we know how that will fail. I hope that there's no discourse on that, but you know, like it will fail, and it will. And there's a real thing. There's a real political movement. It's I think the initiative of Zaragoza. You might find it on YouTube. There is like real stuff in Latin America. They're talking about not democracy. They're not talking about any of that. Let's just be honest, it's minarchism, but it's republicanism, it's republic, it's the defense of the minority. As disgusting as that may sound to you, sir, really, our perpetual struggle against collectivism has really, really killed our soul. So any little move away from that is fine enough, because the minority never gets respected. I'm not putting forth republicanism, I'm just being practical here. Like, I want to outgrow my own ideology, because, okay, sure, I'm an anarchist. Sure, I put forth this free market ideas, but let's really put forth something that I can't really talk to. It's just that it's going to be a long generational battle until they
It's
get.
not what's achievable in the near future.
I agree with that.
You know, yeah, you put the dream out there and say that's where we want to go. But today, what can we do to make it tomorrow?
Very true.
We're dealing with some really hard.
That's like the same reason that I generally support people like running for office in New Hampshire. Like, you know, I won't necessarily vote for them, I won't campaign for them, but like, I'm cool with it because, you know, whatever we can do to achieve more freedom in the near future. Like, right now we still have a government. Right now we have to deal with that as it is, basically. And there does seem to be a chance that like accomplishing more freedom through that route. So yeah, I get it.
It's
and they're going. Sorry to cut you off there,
no, it's cool.
But real quick, like it's not like down in Mexico. I feel like there's quite a bit more of a struggle than there is here in New Hampshire.
Yeah,
definitely helps put things in perspective.
Seriously,
Things could be a lot worse.
Yes.
Definitely could be a lot worse. I mean, I almost got detained for asking 2 questions about a police officer who crashed their vehicle into a hotel, and there was a government agent there, it's like, why are you asking questions? Why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? And it got to the point where I was like, either you leave, finish this conversation, or you stay here for a very long time. And so yeah, I mean, it's a real struggle, but I mean, I really appreciate what you guys are doing still. Like, what I have found here, the depthness of philosophy, and what I've been able to participate with one another, I bring back. That's something that I talk about and tell my people and say, I ask them this stupid question, as stupid it is. I say, what would you say if you had a bunch of white people in a room all listening to you?
Yeah, who?
Welcome to never.
I have a couple of questions, sort of relating to the history and like why our culture is different in the U.S. than in Mexico, and you know, like, if we're going to have NAFTA sometime, you know, if we're going to have some kind of merger of the three countries, Canada, U.S., Mexico. Most Americans don't know that much about Mexico, and they don't even know that much about the history of the U.S. having to do with Mexico. I have a friend that's a Mexican national and lives somewhere down on the Pacific coast now, but and he told me, well, he says in our history books when I grew up, went to school, he said they told us about how the U.S. took like half of the land area of Mexico. And, you know, of course we don't get it taught that way. You know, we're like, it's called manifest destiny, that we sort of owned all that land, we deserved it somehow. Could you tell us about how that's taught? I mean, what's the real history of,
Sure.
or from the Mexican perspective?
I made it to Mexican school, I guess, indoctrination to like the second grade. First grade, they were teaching us about Columbus and the discovery of America, and the role that America really played. And it was like kind of undertones, like, well, you know, they stole a bunch of land, they were oppressing us, X, Y, Z, you know, the story. But I think that the reason that it's pushed is because it brings forth a victim mentality, which it gives license for them to act as they please, and they don't have to have any rationality behind it. So in that world of images, symbols, and ideas, the state can manifest whatever it wants. It can create whatever history it wants. So yeah, it goes to a point where I was saying, you know, they would just manufacture history to blame the United States. But hey, the Mexican government really sold a lot of its land individually, for private interest, like Salinas de Gortari, previous president, I think between 1990 and 1996, around there, he sold like millions of acres of Mexican land to bankers. I mean, that's where it went to, but for his own personal gain. And that's kind of the thing that gets obfuscated, because you can say, well, look at those white devils, you know, they're stealing our land. But I mean, you're doing it too. There's no respect with you people. Yeah. You people, meaning those who believe in authority, who are conditioned to operate in government and have a personal stake in it. Right. Just to be more clear, because, you know, racist.
Hey, what do you think about you people?
Yeah. See, my friend pointed out to me how, you know, that all the way up to Montana used to be part of Mexico. He says, you know, Montana is just a Spanish word for mountain. You know, it's used to be part of Mexico.
And you know, the thing that kind of like also meshes together is the Tex-Mex culture.
Yeah.
It really does. Think about it, because like Mexicans also populated that area, it cultivated the culture. So there's this I mean, it's cool, it collates together. So, you know, there's a rugged individualism and able to maintain your own property and continue being through a mutual benefit.
Yeah.
So, you know, there's that. I hope that answered your question. I don't know.
Well, just on history, but you know, this is different. I traveled in Mexico one time. I was going to Central America, so I was a transmigrante.
Sure.
And so I had always heard, and I knew a little bit about like bribery to get through, and they called it mordida. Is that the right word?
Yeah.
Little bites of everything. Everywhere you go.
Because they're rats. You see, rats bite little things once in a while. They're just always nibbling. So
so one day I was driving down the road, and it came to an intersection where I had to like turn slight left, and my daughter says, "Hey Dad, there's two policemen there, and they're waving at you to pull over." And she says, "But don't stop, don't stop." but I was a good guy, you know. I stopped, and they were speaking Spanish to me, and I'm going like, "Oh God, this is a strain." I took Spanish in high school. And they were saying, blah, 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 dinero, blah, 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 blah. I said, wait, what does dinero mean? Oh, yeah, that means money.
The universal language, you know.
So I had my dollars in one pocket, my pesos in another pocket, and I says, let me think, cuánto dinero, you know, and they said, 20, you know, it's 20. So I said, I go into my pesos pocket and I peeled out 20 pesos, which is probably, they were NP, so I don't know how much that is now, but new pesos, because the old pesos are no good. It was probably equivalent to like $1.50 or something like that. And he says, "Y para mi amigo," or para mi amigo, and I says, and I was trying to think of the words, I was straining my mind to remember my Spanish, and I says, "Oh, ¿por qué?" And he says, "Para comida." He says to eat, for dinner. He wants a little bribe so he can get dinner.
Well, that's a cool thing about not really. I don't want to say this because it's gonna be disgusting when I go to bed. That's a cool thing about Mexican cops, No, like.
Well, if you carry enough pesos, you can get free.
There's a lot of leverage. There's a lot of leverage, and it's different because Mexican cops don't have this predatory proclivity to just look for threats. They're just hanging out there, waiting for the day to end. They're not they have guns and they're looking down on you, showing force, but
They're just trying to make some fucking money.
exactly, pretty much. They don't really care about the ideology, the narrative, the whole mythos. It's just like, hey man, I just want pesos.
I'll tell you a second story. It's similar. I was coming back from Central America and I was driving through, and I actually hired this guide from Belize to drive through Mexico with me. And so he had a cooler between his feet, just a 6-pack cooler or whatever. We had Coca-Cola in it. And so these cops come up, they have black uniforms and they have like a bandolero of like cartridges and their guns and everything, and they say, "What's in the cooler?" And I go like, Coca-Cola. And he says, "Oh, can I have one? It's really hot."
Literally, yes. Yes, exactly.
That's all it took for me to get past that point.
Coke is not good for dehydration.
Yeah, I know, but
It's like, they drink it anyways. They love that stuff. Any more questions? We can finish here on a very good note. I mean, we covered a lot of topics in a lot of areas. I mean, thank you for all the questions, really.